Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and now that my obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And today I'm going to address kind of the elephant that's in the living room right now with my channel. The fact that I am utilizing accommodating resistance, bands, chains. I'm using Westside style conjugate method, but I am applying it to raw lifting. And this is something I need to address if some people don't understand why I'm doing it. They don't understand some of the points I've made of criticism in the past. And they don't understand why I'm not recommending it for most of you. And that's the most important thing. So let me put on my +5 hat of speechcraft, lovingly called my +5 hat of autism by many of you. And we need to talk about this. Because if you guys recall, I did kind of give some problems with Westside for raw lifters. I absolutely have in the past. And what I told you guys before, I ran this early on in YouTube, right? I was running full conjugate method, but I was also messing around with single ply lifting. And what is it that I came back and told you guys? My max raw bench went down 10 pounds. My raw squat went down 20 pounds, but my deadlift did go up. I actually pulled sumo, only the second time I'd ever pulled sumo. I pulled like 600 pounds. I pulled 600 pounds since starting YouTube while running this system. Apparently all those speed pulls and box squats carry over really well to sumo deadlifts, even if you don't train it. But I was training deficit deadlifts, speed pulls, all that stuff. And the point that needs to be made, we need to talk a little bit about accommodating resistance. We need to talk about a little bit weak points for raw lifters so that guys understand where we're coming from here. And then we need to look at some of the problems you run into with guys like Alpha Destiny, because a lot of people, and I just banned anybody for this. I'm just going to be honest with you. If you guys equate what I'm doing to naturally enhanced, it's not that I can't take a joke. It's that it's literally insulting to strength athletes to do that. It's such an insult to powerlifting that if you actually think that he in any way is associated with any of that, or that he's the origin of accommodating resistance, and you actually don't know people more famous than Alex who mess with this stuff, or you think that he's some sort of definitive guide or expert on it, then you really don't deserve an opinion. You shouldn't be allowed to state your opinion in a public forum about strength training, because he's not. He's just a kid who started playing around with it, and he actually misapplies a lot of it. So the perfect example was his deadlift, and I said that was going to happen. Everyone said that was going to happen. He came over and said, well, I'm going to apply this system and use the law of accommodation as Louis Simmons talks about it, and I'm going to pull 600 pounds. What happened? He failed 585. He had been doing all these rack pulls, all these reverse band deadlifts, all this block pulls, right? All this stuff to where he didn't do any heavy pulling from the floor. What happened? He went to deadlift 585 and he couldn't lock it. Even with a sumo, even with straps, he could not lock the 585. That was a missed lift. Even if the straps were taken off, that was a missed lift. He couldn't lock it. He took everything that he had to break it off the floor. So he failed that lift. What does that tell you guys? That he didn't apply any of this correctly, and he actually didn't. Like, had he gone and seen what guys like Louis Simmons actually do for their deadlift, he would have realized he can't do what he does. He did nothing but partials and accommodating resistance. He did no speed pulls. He did no deficit deadlifts, and everything he did was a partial. Guess what? The reality is with deadlifts, they don't actually do, let me state this again, Westside guys don't do heavy partials on deadlifts, just for those who weren't aware, because Alex was a low 500s deadlifter, right? But he was block pulling whatever, Jefferson reverse cock pulls 700 pounds, right? Doing high handle trap bar with 700 pounds, right? All this stuff. What happened the second he had to grab a weight from the floor that he had to pull from the full range of motion? What happened? He failed 585. He could not lift it. And he never came back and ever was successfully attempted it again. We have never seen him pick up anything from the floor heavier than low 500s ever in his entire life. And he still probably can't. He misapplied the system. Misunderstood it. They don't use deadlifts for heavy partials to lift heavier than their max. Everything is submaximal. Let me state that again. Everything that Westside does on the deadlift is below their 1 rep max. They PR in meets. In other words, they don't rack pull 800 pounds and then go deadlift 700 in comp. No, they rack pull 600 pounds below the knee and then pull 800 in comp. That's how they work. They rely on box squats, speed pulls, deficit deadlifts. They do pulls in the rack against pins. They do some reverse band stuff and things, but again, there's a wide variety of different deadlifts that they utilize, but they use the box squat. He didn't do any box squatting. He went and pulled sumo thinking he was using their system, didn't do box squats twice a week. No speed boxes, no max effort boxes, nothing. So that's a problem. So let's go over and you need to understand that. The deadlift is treated as a different beast in that sort of system. And as far as all the accommodating resistance goes, if you're a raw lifter, you don't do the partials. You don't do a bunch of board work. You don't do stuff like that, right? You do everything full range of motion and you use accommodating resistance, but what do you guys need to do? All of that needs to be heavy off the chest still. Like on the bench press, you don't use so much accommodating resistance that you're going lighter than 90% of your max for your chest, off the weight off your chest. So in other words, even if you're using 100 pounds of bands or chains somehow, you better be within 10% of your max with the weight that's on your chest still at the bottom, because that's where most of the tension is. And what happens? That's where most of the tension is on the pecs and to some extent the triceps. Deepest stretch on the muscles, that's where they're weakest. If you don't train them near limits ever at the bottom, what happens? You don't get stronger. Now, you might gain some muscle and everything through all the other fibers involved with the other ranges of motion, and you might gain some strength through there, but you're going to severely lack when you have to do it raw because you didn't train those joint angles correctly, and you didn't hypertrophy some of the fibers there, and since they're weak, you lose all of that power that you're building, that you're able to actually build, that you did with all the other work, the chains, the bands, the speed work. If you're still too weak off the bottom, you can't get enough momentum to sustain it and utilize all that explosiveness you've built through those ranges of motion. So for the raw lifter, you still have to do your paused work. You have to do your paused raw bench. You have to do back squats. You have to do them. They're going to take a back seat to your training, but you still have to do them regularly. And you still have to look at things like, are your quads big enough? Right? When you're squatting with knee wraps in a squat suit, your quads darn is important. You still have to address them if you're going to be a raw squatter. Same thing on the bench press. You still need to make sure that your pecs are big if you're going to be a raw bench presser. And it's not to say even the way that they do it won't bring, you still couldn't get strong at them, because you can. But if you want your raw lifts to be proportionate, you're going to have to work those things. So these things have to be done, but they have to be applied intelligently. And that's the thing that people need to remember. What is the Westside system built around? Accessory movements, assistance movements, special exercises for all your weak points. All right, you have to assess those, and that is what every coach who uses that system tells lifters, is that if you fail on the system, it's usually because you didn't address the correct weak points. Your weak points are based on what you're doing, and if you're a raw lifter, you have different weak points, right? If you're a raw lifter, you have different weak points than a multiply lifter does, right? Therefore, your weak points are going to need to be addressed in the system, and you do so accordingly. You do so accordingly. But you still do all the extra volume work, all the smaller exercises, all the special exercises. You do all those things, but they do need to be addressed. Things like quads will sometimes take a little more priority than the extra posterior chain. If you're a raw squatter and you're running that system, you still do glute ham raises and things. You still do that stuff. But, you might have to work in more belt squats. You might have to work in some pause squats. You might have to do some extra quad work instead of maybe a lot of the extra hamstring work. Maybe then doing the extra sets of good mornings and things, right? So it's the way that you need to address it will be built around your weak points, and you address those with your whatever form of lifting or wherever you are as a lifter. You have to address those weak points as you go, and if you don't, the system will fail. So when I tell most of you guys don't need to be using bands and chains, and you don't need to be doing this because you're going to program it wrong. Most people who attempt that sort of training system on their own, outside of the guidance of the coach, on their own for the first time, oftentimes get weaker. You oftentimes regress. And it's because it's a very complicated system. And the majority of people out there listening, I'm going to always recommend minimalist basic systems for you. When you get more advanced, you can hit the strength standards I set. You're willing to really, really dig deep into training programming, because if you're going to run a conjugate type system, you better have an intricate knowledge of programming. In other words, if all of my basic programs that I've written for you guys, not using that, if you don't understand them inside and out and why I do everything that's in them, not just that you understand them, but you could look at that and be like, oh, this is why he put this here in this program. That's why no one should change this or that. If you don't understand that, you have no chance of getting conjugate right because it's a very complex system and it doesn't have a lot of margin for error. You can mess stuff up really bad and then you regress because you don't concentrate on the right areas. Because a lot of it is not only identifying, hey, what accessory movements will make me stronger at this lift or that lift, and then what other exercises do I need to do to get stronger at that accessory movement. So you look at it and say, hey man, I need to get stronger at pin lay rows. Pin lay rows will help my deadlift go up and stabilize my bench more, right? You'll look at that and be like, so I need to thicken my back up. I need to thicken all this up, and this will improve it. But then you need to go, okay, well, you start stalling on the pin lay rows. How do you get stronger at the pin lay rows? That's a lot of what that system revolves around is you have all your accessory movements, and then you have special exercises to make you better at the accessory movements. And yeah, you get jacked. People who run that system are usually really jacked because there's so much volume in it, so many different muscle angles are worked, there's so much extra hypertrophy to make sure everything is thick. The guys are generally jacked who run it. It's actually a fantastic, from people think about it as a hypertrophy or bodybuilding type program, it actually works really, really well. So it actually is great for putting on size. It will make you thick, it'll make you big. But it's a high margin for error system, and it's not for everybody. And so for a lot of people, I don't push them in that direction. It's what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to explain a lot of it as I go. And you guys are going to notice things are going to change all the time. You're not going to see me do the same workout 2 times in a row. Things are going to be adjusted continually. We're always working around the bypassing the law of accommodation. Certain things will go in 3-week waves, whether it's bands and chains and speed work will go in 3-week waves with undulating weights rotating through accommodating resistance. Accessory movements will sometimes be swapped every 3 weeks. Max effort lifts will be changed every single week, and oftentimes there'll be variations that address my personal weak points, right? Like my thoracic erectors, my triceps. Any muscle that looks like it might need to thicken up to bring my max up on a lift is going to get extra work. If my quads are lagging, belt squats go in. If my hamstrings are lagging, glute ham raises go in. And you do a lot of sets of a lot of these smaller exercises. You do a lot of direct work. And you pick on those exercises, you pick things that don't stress your entire system the way a deadlift or a back squat does. So there's a lot of that done because you're trying to maximize your thickness in every muscle that's involved in those big lifts. Without using those big lifts to beat yourself into the ground, because there's a threshold when your squat and deadlift get to a certain strength level, you can't just come in and squat and deadlift for 20 sets a week. You just can't. You're going to start reaching a threshold with these things to where you can't handle the workload if you're just trying to do 20 heavy sets of both of them every week, which would be what you would need to grow because of the amount of volume that you need as you get more advanced to stress new adaptation. So you have to start using other exercises that are easier to recover from to thicken everything up so that you can continue to get stronger on those lifts on your heavy sets. So again, it's a complicated system, and it's not for the majority of people. Like if you're at the point where you're still needing to come to YouTube to get your basic programming information and understand the basics of training, I'm not going to push you in the direction of that system. It's not going to be for you. And if you can't afford a lot of the equipment, like you don't have a few thousand dollars to drop down on equipment, or you're not in a very, very well-equipped gym, probably not the best system for you. I have $7,000 tied up now in my home gym. If I wasn't going to run the system, I wouldn't have bought some of the other stuff that I bought. I bought extra things just to deal with this system. Chains, bands, band pegs for my rack, a glute ham raise, extra boxes, a safety squat bar. I bought a lot of things in addition to already having a well-stocked home gym just to be able to run this system. It's not for everybody. I'm going to utilize it, and I know how to utilize it, and I'll adjust it as I go. But this system is not for everybody. So when I'm telling a lot of you guys, no, you probably don't want to run this, I really do mean it. I really do mean it. For most of you out there, you don't have the programming knowledge to get it right. You don't have the training experience. You're not under a coach, and you probably don't even have the correct equipment. Because look exactly what happened. Alpha Destiny tried to run it. Alex tried to run it, and he didn't get his deadlift goals. It didn't work. As he messed it up, he didn't do it right. And he failed by a pretty large margin from reaching that goal. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.